Hey, how you doing today? My name is Relyea, and thank you so much for stopping by. Today is a very exciting day. Edge magazine just released their article about Hollow Knight Silksong. They had a world exclusive interview with Team Cherry. So I thought that this was just going to be an interview with Ari Gibson, but it also included William as well. So Jen Simpkins, I think that's how I say that. Hopefully I said that right. She did an interview with them for several hours and also got to watch them play Hollow Knight Silksong. And so she was able to get some screenshots and just ask them a bunch of questions. And ooh, I'm so excited. They explain a lot of stuff, and we're gonna do a little digging into this. And so let's go ahead and take a look at this first image. Okay, so right here we can see that Hornet is jumping, platforming, doing her thing, and it's in a new-ish area. I think we've seen this area before, but one of the things that they talk about is how Hornet looks like she is climbing on this platform that looks like it could potentially be motorized. I think that's going to be super interesting later on when we see just stuff like this in general, right? Where Hornet is like this whole kingdom is probably going to start moving as things happen. It seems like what was it? Not Deep Dock, although he's a good content creator too. There's that whole area with like the flame and like the fire area and like all these pipes. Maybe there's like some steam and pressure that gets built up, and then later on this platform allows us to ascend and climb up. I'm thinking that might be a thing. That might be a thing. So one of the things that was talked about early on is that Team Cherry is going to lean slightly more into detailing combat over platforming due to Hornet's reduced hang time in the air and her natural huntress proficiencies. This is the stuff that I am like super excited for, because I can't wait to just feel the change in the way that Hornet plays and feels in comparison to the Little Knight. I think that it's going to be a game changer. Sorry, dad jokes. But I'm not sure that Hornet would really like being called heavy. I know my wife wouldn't like that, but just saying. I'm just excited for the way that the game is going to look and feel differently. Again, going back to this image of Hornet jumping here, you can see that the spool around it is a little bit different. And so later on in the magazine, they talk about the crests, and that's kind of like the charm system. There's a crest system that allows Hornet to equip tools and different things like that. So it seems like the different quests, one, it's clearly, obviously, going to change the UI. They explain that in this magazine. That's going to happen, and we'll see several different crests as they change the UI as we go along. But also, I think that they do give Hornet different abilities as well. So they pointed that out. So very cool. It seems like overall, this game is going to allow the player to change up Hornet's abilities and play styles far more than just what the charm system did. So we'll talk more about crests here in just a little bit. So one thing that was interesting is that they also talked about how weary pilgrims journey to their destination, carrying bundles of precious thread, and gates are opened through playing melodic tributes. So we already knew that this a little bit, that we're expecting music to be a thing. Again, they don't really talk about how much music plays a role in this article, but I imagine that we're going to be seeing quite a bit of Hornet kind of playing her tune as she goes. So I'm kind of excited to see what happens with that. And Ari was also quoted saying, "The core of this world is mainly a reflection of Hornet. Her fighting is so fast that it changes the way the enemies need to be designed." We were all expecting that the level design and the enemy designs were going to be a lot different, right? If nothing else, if Hornet's moving faster, it's going to make the world feel smaller. And then if she's jumping higher, which is apparently a thing, even though she falls faster and she's heavier, it changes up what they need to do. In fact, they even had to change the way that they do the camera, which I think is so cool that they're just dialing in the whole game and really building it around Hornet. And I think that's kind of why they even made Hollow Knight Silksong, right? Is they probably tested Hornet in Hollow Knight really early on and just found out that she just didn't fit, whether she's too fast or she jumped too high. She was feeling claustrophobic. She's feeling trapped in Hollow Nest. So she got her own game. Oh, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be so good. All right, so now we're gonna take a look at the UI when we're looking at the crest. And so as you can see, this one has way more stuff going on. This one has 6 slots as compared to some of the ones that we have seen before. And see, even the way that it's shaped, how it's got all of the points, I think that we end up seeing this crest, the Reaper, specifically equipped in some of the upcoming images, because we will see those points kind of coming off of Hornet's silk spool. You'll see what I'm talking about. And what's interesting too is that here we have just the straight pin, right, that Hornet's able to shoot out. Sorry, this is might be a little bit blurry. I tried to zoom in as much as I could so we could look at all the different tools and stuff. But the straight pin is something that we'll see later. They talk about how we will be able to upgrade the individual weapons. So this straight pin, we could potentially have the 3 pins that shoot out, and then also even later we will see like almost like a longer pin that will probably deal more damage because there's only one of them, but it's also longer. So Hornet will be able to kind of pick and choose and modify the individual tools that she has. I'm just like, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. So yeah, there's a couple of new tools that we see on here. So next to this green one towards the bottom, that looks like, I don't know if that's a modified pin, whatever that is. And then also you got that purple thing over to the right. I don't know what this stuff is. Let me know in the comments what you think this is, because I think it's super interesting. Another thing they talk about in this magazine is how Hornet is much more physical and the world as a result is more physical. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They explain it how there is less glowy orb things and magic bursts of light and many more blades and traps. And so when I think of many more blades and traps, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're gonna get more Path of Pain like. But they also explained how it's not gonna be more Path of Pain like, right? How this game is gonna be more focused on the fighting and the battling. I think that just the environment is going to be dangerous, and it's not going to be just super like in your face. I think that there's going to be little traps and different things like that. In fact, Jen says that they see several trigger threads across the kingdom designed to catch those not paying proper attention. So I wonder how many traps we're going to see and how often, and maybe as we go along, as we defeat certain bosses, maybe some of those traps get removed, or maybe we learn from those traps. I don't know. It'll be super interesting to see how those traps work. I didn't really see anything in the images that looked like they could be traps in the magazine, but then again, maybe I just need to look a little bit harder. So I don't know, maybe we'll go back in and see if we can't find some of those traps. Let me know if you saw any of them. So next, let's take a look at this Moss Grotto area. And so you can tell right off the bat, it's just super just lush and green and full. And just look how many layers there are to this. Like it is so deep, just with the imagery of what's going on. Like there's so much here, and I cannot wait. I didn't really pull too much out of this other than the enemies. Like they look like they're part of the world, of the map. Like they definitely look like they belong there for sure. And Hornet's probably gonna take them out. I almost feel bad. Not really, almost, just a little bit. Not really. But also she's got 2 different items here. So I don't think that this crest here that we see at the top left, I don't think that is the Reaper crest that we were just looking at. I don't think it's the Wanderer either, but I don't know. Oh, and for reference, here's the Wanderer Crest. This is what it looked like back at the Nintendo Direct E3. So this one has different tools, obviously, but overall, I mean, the UI looks pretty similar. There wasn't a whole bunch of different changes between the Reaper and the Wanderer. as far as like the crest system goes. I mean, it looks very, very similar. If anything, with the Reaper, we see a little bit less color in where the tools and different things will end up going. All right, so here we can see Hornet playing music, and this is the only image we see of Hornet playing music in this spot here, but you can also see the UI is a little bit different. One thing is that I think that tool that she has might be one of those straight pins, and maybe it's just maybe it's explosive, or maybe she added something to it. It seems like it might be a version of it. And then also just her nail in general, that's definitely different because of the crest, so that must give her some sort of new or different ability or something like that. So that's really cool. And there is something else that we see here, but I think we're going to take a look at it later. I'll point out some other details that I've seen in this image and a couple of other ones that we'll see later. Yeah, so if we take a look over here at the old version of Hornet playing music, we can see that she's playing with opposite hands. Take a look at that. Hornet is actually ambidextrous. I think the Little Knight was ambidextrous as well. I just thought that was interesting. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just there. It's just a thing. All right, so back to the magazine. There's so much good information in this magazine. Please make sure you pick it up, because I'm not going to go over every single like word in detail in it. I'll make sure to put a link down in the description below. They talked about how the most complex non-boss enemies in Hollow Knight were humanoid bugs that had like a sword and shield, and William says even those were quite simple, but characters in this game are kind of one step beyond that, where it doesn't quite feel right for them to be that simple. And by that simple, he had alluded to earlier, talked about earlier, how you could just like lead some of the enemies like off a cliff or off the platform, or they would just like run into a wall or whatever. And so now with Hollow Knight Silksong, it seems like the enemies, the non-boss enemies, are gonna be tougher. They talked about how you can't even really just add in like a Goomba type enemy. They should be smarter than that. So it's really going to be interesting to see kind of the evolution of the enemies, even from the simple enemies all the way up to the more complex non-boss enemies, and how much detail gets put into them as far as what they can do. He says the enemies have to have surprising ways of chasing you, keeping up with you, or evading your attacks. And this partially just screams Primal Aspids. I don't know why. Enemies chasing you, surprising you. Yeah, it feels bad, man. But examples are given of one enemy that hides like a hermit crab, and another that charges like the moss charger, but it goes faster with time to make the pattern a little bit harder to predict. And I really love that idea of having something that's familiar but also new. It seems like there's gonna be like a little twist on almost everything as we have all of the different enemies. Like nothing's gonna be just like super straight, simple forward. I think it's going to be good. I really do. It seems like we're going to have a ton of different enemies, and a lot of them are just going to be more complex in that they have more moves or more different things. The fact that they're going to have surprising ways to chase us could be fun, could be very difficult. I'm just excited to see how all of this goes. So yeah, let's go ahead and check out this next image here. So this is something that we've seen before, and it's these enemies with the scissors. And again, so here is the new UI, and I believe that this is the Reaper Crest that Hornet is now using, because it's got all those different points, right? This looks like it. I don't know what else to tell you. So the other thing is that you're talking about how she is currently carrying a boomerang tool, and that was one of those things I was hoping we would see a boomerang. I just thought it would be cool. And so there are many sub reactions to many tools to keep them interesting and give that extra bit of mystery. So when Hornet throws her boomerang, it will bounce off of different enemies differently. So I imagine that if some enemy is using like a shield, it's going to work a little bit different than a smaller enemy versus maybe even this enemy with the scissors. So I thought that was interesting. And another thing before we move on, later in the magazine, they talk about Hornet being able to zip around with one of her abilities, where she like throws her needle, right, and uses it to like a grappling hook, right? These enemies with scissors, I think what's going to end up happening is that they are going to be able to stop Hornet from using her grappling hook. They alluded to that, in that they'll be able to cut her out of the air, essentially. So she could either use her silk to try and use her grappling hook and get around, but I think that they're going to cut the silk, right, and make it so that way it just really slows her down, and then she has to deal with these enemies. So I'm excited to see how this works. It's gonna be fun to have it like kind of change from what she was able to do before to what like giving her an ability, letting her use it, get around, get super comfortable with it, and then kind of having some enemies kind of take that ability away. I think that's gonna be really fun. We clearly start in the Moss Grotto when we're playing Silksong, but we get confirmation that the first area will be the lava-moated bone forest area that was cut from the first game, and this will play host to the hub town Bone Bottom, as well as curious bell-lined tunnels that appear to be named the Marrow. Marrow? I'm so bad with reading. I'm so bad. I thought that was super interesting. So we're going to be essentially trapped. We're gonna have one path of one way to go, at least through getting through Bone Bottom and then to these bell tunnels. And so that was kind of very similar to Hollow Knight, in that you couldn't just go anywhere right from the bat. There was a certain path that you have to go, at least until you get your first ability, and then from there the game opens up. And I really like the way that Team Cherry was able to do that with their games, is that they do hold your hand a little bit, even if it doesn't feel like that. They do guide you, and then the game expands, which is so much fun. I can't wait to see how all this goes. And so another thing they talk about is that many enemies deal 2 damage. I don't know about you, but in Hollow Knight, all of the enemies that dealt 2 damage like completely like threw me off guard and were just like super tough. I don't know if it was just that the 2 damage enemies were not very common, and the ones that did deal 2 damage, like Nightmare King Grim, they were just so fast, and like they were just tough, and so it was like kind of it was just they were just super difficult. So it'll be interesting to see how the environment will be dealing 2 damage sometimes, and more enemies that aren't bosses are dealing 2 damage. It's gonna be I think it's gonna be fun. It sounds like what they're gonna do is you are going to take a little bit longer to be able to build up your silk to get to the point where you can heal, but then when you do heal, you'll be able to heal full mass. So the way that they expect the game to play is that you are going to go from full health to almost no health and kind of bounce back and forth in between the two, because you're going to go from no health, build up a little bit of silk as you're taking damage, and then pop up 3 masks all at once. And so you went from 1 to 4. So that change is going to be, it sounds like you're going to have huge swings in health as you're playing. So it's really fast to heal. You're healing a lot more, but it takes longer to heal. It'll be very interesting to see how it plays out, because going down to 1 health is tough, but being able to heal fast, I like it. So I know a lot of people had a tough time not having a bank in Hollow Knight, and so one thing that they have added that is similar to a bank is the way that Rosary Beads are going to work. So I was really curious about how this part of the money works. And so they can be found strung up throughout the game, and if you die, you get to keep the rosaries that are on a string. And so there was mention of this makes it so that way you don't have to go back to town to, quote, liquidate your assets. And so I don't know what items that we're getting, but it sounds like there is going to be a lot more items to get and find in Silksong. Kind of like how Hollow Knight, there's like Wanderer's Journals and crests and seals and different things like that. The arcane eggs. I think Silksong is probably going to have more of that, but just like maybe smaller items that we can turn in for rosaries. But then the rosaries are going to act a little bit like a banking system, and some vendors will string them for you and you can pay a small amount to be able to get them put back onto strings. So this is cool because it does act like a banking system. They said that you can pay 120 rosaries to keep 100 rosaries like on a string, so it keeps it safe. So if you die, you get to keep 100 of them. I think that makes sense. I'm wondering, how much are we going to be dying? Because it seems like it might be a lot. Ari says that they ended up with 100 different benches in Silksong, like 100 different benches. So it's super up there, right? I had a feeling that this might be the case, and there's two different reasons for why there would be so many. Either one, we need a lot of benches so we can get back to them and fix our tools. But two, it could be that the game is just twice as big. I think it honestly might be more than twice as big. Just because there's twice as many benches doesn't mean it's just twice as big. If Hornet's running around faster and climbing higher, she's jumping higher, the game is just naturally going to feel smaller. So I think that it might even be more spread out as far as how wide the benches are. I don't think you're going to go like 2 screens, have another bench, and 2 screens have. It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how big this game ends up getting. And just for reference, I saw that there was 43 benches in the base game. I'm pretty sure that's correct. But then I think that means that a couple more benches were added in with some of the DLC. Oh, there's just so much. There's just so much here. Oh my gosh. Guys, pick up the magazine. I'm telling you. I'm not even going over every single thing. There's just so much. Oh man. So another thing is, speaking of difficulties, they're hoping to make sure the difficulty stays the same as with Hollow Knight, as opposed to making it more difficult. They want to keep the game, I guess accessible is probably the right word for it. So I know that there was a lot of people who played Hollow Knight who thought it was just way too difficult, and I think that this is, like they said, they're just trying to keep it on the same level so people could jump in. The idea is that they want people to be able to jump into Silksong and have never played Hollow Knight before. So I'm sure we're gonna get like little pieces of lore from Hollow Knight sprinkled into Silksong, but I don't think that it's just gonna be like a continuation of the exact same story. I think Hornet has her own story to tell here, and maybe there'll be some intertwining with Hollow Knight. So they said in the magazine that Hornet can develop tools based on stuff she finds in the world. And so I thought this was super interesting. They're talking about how Hornet could be fighting one of the enemies who throws the straight pin. Hornet picks it up after the battle, presumably, or just from their corpse, and learns how to make that straight pin, or she's able to throw her own flavor on it and can do the straight pin plus, I think they were talking about having like a red string on it or something like that. So now maybe it throws harder, or eventually she's able to throw 3 of them. She's able to change the tools, but also she's able to learn how to make the tools from enemies. I think that is super cool, because then it makes you want to go out of your way to find certain enemies, right? There's already a lot more enemies in Silksong than Hollow Knight. I have a feeling that there's going to be quite a few enemies that we only see once or very rarely, and then that's where we're going to find some of these tools. So you'll want to go trek out of your way to be able to go find something like a new tool or something like that that'll then be useful later in the game. I think that's great. And then more than likely, we'll probably also be able to buy tools or buy blueprints from tools from NPCs as we go as well. But I really like the idea of being able to explore to find the tools, or have to best some sort of enemy to be able to get the tools. Ari and William were talking about how there'll be a ton to explore and many other lands to go to. They don't want to spoil it, but there'll be more places to go to once we make it to the top of the Citadel. So this is super exciting. They're trying not to spoil it too much, but they had talked about how the main point of the game is to get to the Citadel, and then from there it'll be like to get to the top of the Citadel, and then so it sounds like we'll be climbing even further once we get further in the game. And then after that, I think that 1, it'll probably open up, but 2, I think that the game's going to be a lot more than just get to the Citadel. It'll be interesting what they mean by go to other lands. I just wonder how we're going to be traveling around to these different lands, and where we're going to go and what we're going to see and how different it's going to be. Yes, I'm here for it. I want to see all their different creations. I have a feeling that this might be their last like Hollow Knight world game. And so if that's the case, I think that they're really trying to push it and expand it quite a bit. So yeah. So later in Edge magazine, they explain how the crests work a little bit more. And so they are essentially customizable loadouts, and you can change from crest to crest. So that makes things really, really awesome, because then you don't have to get to a bench and then like change all of your charm loadouts. Like, I don't know about you, but I personally had like a couple of different charm loadouts that I would use. Maybe one more so for traveling, one for one set of bosses, and then a third charm loadout for like a third set of bosses, depending on if I would need to do like a nail build or a spell build or some mix of that, right? Well, with Silksong, we'll be able to have several different crests, and then from there we'll be able to swap them out very, very quickly. So if you want to just sit at a bench and then just swap whatever you need to do, whether it's a defensive build or offensive build, whatever, it'll be quick. I really like that they added that in there. And then also they are talking about how crests are more like necklaces or something that you wear, and so there will be evidence of that. Makes it sound like we're probably going to see Hornet wearing stuff depending on what crests you have and what attachments you have. So that could get really interesting. I'm wondering if that, because that she's actually physically wearing stuff, if we will then be able to have to wear something to be able to show an NPC that we have a certain item, or if we're dressed a certain way that shows that we're friends, that we belong in that town or whatever. I have a feeling that there'll be a reason for us to be wearing stuff in that way. So that'll be cool. And then we talked earlier about how the HUD shape will change with the different crests. So that's kind of cool. Sounds like some of the different crests are going to be the reason that we have certain attacks. And so it'll be useful to have, I don't know, a certain crest will, there'll be a reason to change out your crest. Like maybe a crest will have less notches for tools, but it'll allow us to do an extra attack or something like that. So very, very interesting. They briefly touched on the flea system, and they're basically saying that the fleas will act almost like a traveling town, and so they're a troop that's all together, right? So the more fleas you help out, the bigger the troop and the town is gonna get. And I don't know, maybe they will be able to sell you more stuff. They'll just have more things available to you, but they will grow, and we'll be able to see them throughout our journey in Hollow Knight Silksong. So that is very cool. Fleas will probably definitely be worth saving. So I wonder what happens when we get all of them. Let's hope that their fate isn't the same as with the little grubs, you know. So the other thing they talked about is we'll be able to come upon quests as we go. And the first one that they found in this in the demo in the early game was when they made it to Bone Bottom. So the quests that we come across will be kept in Hornet's journal, and they are in addition to the main quest. So there's certain times where it'll be like, hey, go here, and it'll be very clear where we need to go. They were saying how this is going to be in addition to like the bigger game, and it's not going to be something where you have to like have like your to-do list, and we're just going to be doing the standard like hunt task Wayfarer, which is probably go find something, whether it's a secret location or place or something like that. And then finally the Gatherer mission. So those were the only three that were mentioned as far as missions, Hunt, Wayfarer, and Gatherer. But this was really early on in the game, so I imagine that there could be different types of quests later on. So they very briefly touched on the map system, and then they basically just said that you would find a series of evidence, which is gold rings, that would lead to the cartographer. And in this case, it is Chakra. And we already know, we've seen images of us fighting with Chakra, at least at some point in the game. I don't know if that'll be earlier to like prove our skill or merit, or maybe Chakra learned something about us and or the Weavers, and maybe she wants to fight us later. I don't know. At some point there will be an epic battle. We'll see how that goes. But I don't know exactly how the map is going to work, as far as more than likely it's not just going to be handed to us. I wouldn't expect that. I don't know if Hornet is going to fill it out every time she sits at a bench. I imagine more than likely we're going to have a pretty similar map system. I don't expect it to be super different. but I think Chakra is just going to be a really interesting character as we're playing. So they briefly talk about what we're actually doing in Silksong, and they said part of what Hornet is doing is she's lost her traditional strength because of the time bound in the cage, as we saw in the intro and like the demo, the cutscene, right? And it's because it's a prequel. Well, we don't know that for sure, but I mean, it's could be, maybe. There's actually no information of whether this is a prequel or not. We don't know. I'm still holding out on prequel, gang. Why? Because everyone else is saying sequel. That's the main reason why. And because if it ends up being a prequel, I get to say I was right. And if it's a sequel, I get to say, well, I didn't know. Fair enough. So Hornet is restoring her powers in the Weavers, are helping her, right? So yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty straightforward story of kind of what's going on. This is the story of Hornet, and it doesn't really matter when it takes place. It's going to be a good story. It's going to be a good game. I'm here for it. So they also talked about an ability of being able to get Silk Spear, which is a forward lunging ability that cuts through sticky web barriers for the cost of some silk. So I think that might be one of the earlier abilities that we get, which is good. I don't know. I don't know on that one. It's something that we will get. There's so much information here. There's so much information here. Towards the end of the article, Jen goes into a lot of detail of kind of like where she went as far as like the really early game, and how they eventually come across what she called the Bell Beast, which is probably the character that we're going to use for fast traveling, and kind of what happened in that interaction. Again, I'm not trying to spoil every little thing in this magazine, but they did say that is kind of like the exam fight. That is like the bottleneck that you have to go through before the game really opens up and you get like your first ability. I don't know if you get the first ability just before that or just after, but it's right there. So that is super interesting, that we have to fight the thing that is going to eventually give us our fast travel. And I wonder how many times we're going to end up having to fight it. Do we have to tame the beast? Possibly. I kind of liked having the stag because it was kind of like a friendly relationship, and now we've got this Bell Beast thing that we have to fight and have to make it take me where I want to go. I don't know. I felt like the stag was happy to run down the old stag ways, but I don't know. We're gonna have to force this beast to do what we want. So we'll see how that goes. So one of the last questions that was answered in this magazine is, will Team Cherry take a break after Silksong? And they answered that they have their non-Hollow Knight game to work on. And this is one that I'm excited for because I called it. They were working on a game that is called Fearless Fox. And they said that it's kind of gone by the wayside. Every once in a while they get ideas for it and they put it into like a document or something like that, right? But this is something that they trademarked in February of 2019. And yeah, it sounds like it's going to be something similar to Hollow Knight or Silksong in that it's a game that you go explore. But Fearless Fox, I would put money on it that is the game that they have been working on. So yes, very exciting stuff. There was so much here, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out in some of these pictures here. So this image right here is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, you can see that she's got like this great slash thing going on, and there's kind of like four little spikes that are kind of coming off, and I think that has to deal with the way that she is using her crest. And two, if you look at the bottom and also the top right, look at those black areas. It makes me feel like the edges of like the platforms and stuff have all been built out, but they haven't finished the middle parts of it. There's a couple of little places when I look back, I'm like, oh, this isn't done. They're still working on the art aspect of it. And so I think they're getting all the technical stuff done. And I don't know how hard it is for them to fill out this artwork, but it definitely looks like it's missing. You know what I mean? So let's check out the next image. So this one right here is just kind of zoomed in. This is another image from the magazine. So the bottom left, okay, I could understand it's part of the foreground and it's supposed to be black or whatever. But on the bottom right, it seems out of place that it's black in that it's literally assets missing, or the art just isn't there yet. Okay, and then last, this was that image I was talking about earlier, where Hornet was playing music, and she's talking to somebody from the ant tribe. And if you look at the top, there's just the foreground. I can understand like the top, like, okay, it's close to us, so this is all like black, whatever. But then at the bottom, it seems out of place. There's too much black blank area there. And again, I think that some of these images, like for there to be blank area in all three of these different locations, it makes me think that, okay, they're definitely working on the core of the game, and this piece is missing, and they'll work on it. They'll get there. So it seems like there's a good chunk of the world that still needs to be have the art added to it. So maybe it'll be ready next week. I'm kidding. Of course not. I don't know. I don't know how long it takes to develop games. I don't know how much further they need to design and do whatever else. But with some of this stuff missing, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they gotta be getting close, right? Close-ish. But 2021 for sure. It's coming out 2021. That's my prediction, my wide prediction. End of Q1, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to wait and find out. And so I'm gonna leave you with this last picture. So this is known as The Last Judge, and they actually made a reference to Mossbag and said, okay, well, you try and speculate on what this thing is and what it could be. And so I'm gonna do the same thing. It looks like Hornet's got a drill as her item. I can see that, and this fire area looks like it would be pretty difficult to dodge. But this person, this boss known as the Last Judge, what happened to the other judges? Why is there only one? And look at its eyes. It definitely looks like it is crying void. Just saying. It does. That looks like there's a little void action going on in there. So I don't know. Something could be happening with Void in Silksong. I mean, why not? Why not? We'll see what Mossbag has to say on this one, and the rest of the Hollow Knight content creators. I will link a bunch of the other people who have done their due diligence on Edge Magazine. I want you guys to go check them out as well. Thank you so much for stopping by. Be sure to stop by every Tuesday, 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. I go live and talk about stuff. I play games. I go live. And then also, we're almost at 100,000 subscribers. Thank you, everybody who has followed the channel and who has been around. 100,000. We're almost there. Thank you, guys. And I will talk to you again more real soon. Thanks.